Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and the wait for patch 8.2 as well as classic World of Warcraft is a little bit unbearable. But to hold you guys off until the big information and changes and updates come in for the game, I got for you guys a video where I give you my 5 top favorite specs to play in PvP. Something I can do in battlegrounds or arenas to pass the time until the patch 8.2 arrives. Now, this is going to be my personal list of all the specs that I personally enjoy. And generally, I like the specs that are treated as underdogs, or there's some sort of unique playstyle that I simply like about that spec. A lot of you guys share my taste in terms of the specs and classes to play that are generally fun. So I think a lot of you guys would actually enjoy a video like this. So without further ado, let's get on to my top 5 favorite specs in BFA for PvP right now. I feel like on this list, we can't make a top 5 list without mentioning Warlocks once. Warlocks currently in BFA are in an exceptionally great spot, especially if you're someone who destroys Destruction or Demonology. Out of the 2 specs available, I'm someone who favors Demonology. I feel that the Demonology spec is off the bat the more interesting of the specs. Don't get me wrong, Destruction has massive chaos bolts, and we've seen just how successful they are in the 5-5-1-in-1 duel scene. But the idea of summoning armies of demons over and over, sacrificing a billion imps to summon a massive tyrant to obliterate your enemy, I mean, that on its own is really fun to play. First of all, I love the variety of different CC that this spec brings. With all the different talents, you have Fear, you have an ability to horror the enemy away from you, as well as a pet stun from your Felguard. The Felguard can throw his axe at an enemy and stun him in place, whether it is a defensive stun or an offensive to hold the enemy down. I love the idea of summoning a billion pets because enemies can escape damage over time abilities, but they can't really dispel an imp casting fireball at enemies over and over and over. And building up this army, you actually get to see every single NPC rather than get to see every single debuff applied to an enemy. And I feel like it just creates a lot more of an imposing presence. And finally, the big cooldown for Demonology Warlocks, the ability to summon a tyrant on the field. If you're able to get a couple different Azeroth traits and a talent together, then you're able to pop out a very powerful tyrant that will consume, with the talent of consumption, all the imps in an area. So if you're really good at managing your resources and are really good at getting your abilities out, a lot of planning can turn into a very powerful weapon of mass destruction. As soon as you summon the tyrant, that's it, he's off, and all you have to do is pray that he is the right target, because you are playing with pets, and NPCs in the game can sometimes function in really awkward and weird ways. But when it does work, all this effort putting together this army of imps to sacrifice to your tyrant, to feed him for more power, I mean, absolutely, it's probably the coolest experience ever. What I really like about the playstyle for the spec, it has a very long ramp up, but the reward is so much worth to meticulously get all those imps and manage the resources, manage the shards, manage the procs. I mean, absolutely my favorite playstyle and probably my favorite burst ever in the game. The next spec on the list is going to have to be Unholy Death Knight. And now, I know I said that a lot of the specs that I like are actually the underdog specs. Unholy Death Knight would be one of those specs that's not quite an underdog, as Unholy actually have been one of the more popular specs in PvP, as with BFA, as well as Legion, and I believe Warlords General, it was also fairly good. What I like about it is the same thing that I like about Demonology. The playstyle with the pets. I love the fact that you can summon armies and armies of undead. It definitely scratches this itch of playing a Necromancer, which is something I really want to do in World of Warcraft in future expansions. But until we get a real full-fledged Necromancer, the Unholy Death Knight will have to do. The unique playstyle, which is not as unique as it was before, but the ability to necrotic down enemy's health, which everybody else can do with a Maledict trinket now, is still something that is very core to the Unholy Death Knight. Instead of doing damage to an enemy, you can simply choose to suppress any kind of healing that the enemy gets. The amount of healing that a Death Knight has right now with the Death Strikes and with talents like Transfusion, actually you're able to keep yourself afloat for a very long time without a healer. And the best part about the spec, I feel like, is where most of his damage comes from. It comes from your pet auto-attacking as well as your personal auto-attacks. So as long as your weapon actually connects with the enemy, you're doing a majority of your damage. Which in some cases, if you're someone who likes to slow enemies down, control enemies, manage dots the whole time, this comes for a very easy playstyle. As long as you're right-clicking on an enemy and making sure that your auto attacks actually hit the enemy, that's it. You can actually do a lot more in the game. Slow a target here, slow a target there, grip this heal over here, interrupt the enemy over there, and as long as you're getting those auto attacks cashed in, most of your damage simply happens. The base gameplay of an Unholy Death Knight feels very simple and fairly easy to pick up since of the way your damage functions. Because of the spec, how strong it is, and how simple it is to pick up, I feel like a lot of people should take advantage of that fact and try give Death Knight a spin before Blizzard eventually nerfs them, or maybe even buffs them. You never really know how Blizzard do these things. Now, you know I had to put in rogues on this list. As a rogue main, it would be biased to me, but trust me, a lot of people that play mages, warlocks, hunters, paladins, every one of them started to level a rogue as an alt. And why is that? Maybe it could be the fact that rogues have intense amount of CC. You can just crowd control the enemy, sap them, blind them, stun them. Maybe it could be that plus the incredible burst damage or consistency that they can bring depending on the spec of your choice. Regardless, rogues have great mobility, fair amount of crowd control, great damage on top of everything, so I had to add rogues in this list. Now, while Outlaw Rogue is my bread and butter, this is my child, I'm not going to be putting Outlaw Rogue as the spec for you guys to check out. Rather instead, I think a lot of you guys should at least give Subtlety Rogue a go. Subtlety is in an incredible spot right now. At the beginning of BFA, Blizzard put a bunch of shackles to nerf the damage of the spec. Ever since the changes with the recent patch, Subtlety can now pump out pretty great damage. Stack as much master as you can, crit as you can, and learn your rotations when it comes to your burst-based abilities. And then off you go, popping off big damage on everybody. Now, Subtlety is nowhere near as challenging as it was in previous expansions, but a lot of people still find it a little bit jarring the first time around. So if you're somebody who is thinking about trying Subtlety, I say you should give it a go. Take it easy, learn all the rotations, practice on a train dummy once or twice, and then you will be able to lock down an enemy, maybe even multiple enemies at the same time, while dishing out incredibly powerful burst damage on the go whenever you want to. If you ever want to feel like a stealthy assassin sneaking along the enemy lines, taking out all the key targets, healers, tanks, DPS, whoever, then Subtlety Rogue spec will be the spec for you. Now, another spec that I thought I would never put on this list is actually Balanced Druid. If you guys are not aware, when I first began playing World of Warcraft, I actually started out as a Druid main. I started out as a Feral Druid back in Cataclysm with no real early success, but once I swapped to the Balanced Druid, oh my god, was my world turned upside down in the best way possible. And I was a Balanced Druid up until the beginning of Mists of Pandaria when they added Druids the talent of Incarnation. And when that ability went on GCD, I really didn't feel like playing my Druid anymore. I didn't like playing all around Incarnation at the beginning of Mists of Pandaria, so I shortly made a switch to the Rogue. Coming back to the Druid right now, I feel like they have been chiseled out fairly well, and they actually feel pretty good to play in BFA. The amount of damage output, the spread pressure that I can put out, and the way that I cycle and play with my abilities between Arcane and Nature, being able to cycle between them, it actually all flows really well together. Starfalls are insane, being able to maintain your dots on everybody nets you incredible amount of damage, and being able to cast a couple Star Surges is going to be a guaranteed burst. And your Incarnation makes all that damage twice the amplified. That combined with abilities like Typhoon to be able to knock off enemies, this class as a spec, I feel like is the best designed to go into Eye of the Storm, where you can either dot up enemies in the choke point, or if they ever get through to your side, you can simply knock them off the ledge. The absurd damage in this spec can net by yourself in a battleground, to me on its own is straight up hilarious. And to that extent is why I really actually enjoy my Balanced Druid, because of how much damage it can put out while having nowhere near as much gear as all my other alts do, which is around 400 item level. Now, I also have to put mages on the list, and everybody's gonna want to expect for me to put fire mages all over the place, but nope. For me, my favorite option, and I really do mean it, is gonna be Frost. Now, if it was up to a popularity contest, fire mages would have won by 1.5 miles. But for me personally, the playstyle of Frost mages and how they play, how they shatter their abilities, how it feels like it's a lot of combos rather than spamming Greater Pyro the whole game, it actually is my favorite part about the spec of Mage. Since you can play around and abuse the mechanic of shatters, where if an enemy is rooted or frozen or considered frozen, you're actually able to force certain crits, or almost force certain crits, off of your abilities. And with the playstyle that I got going on right now, you're able to combine and combo enemies together. If you have a couple abilities that are on a very short cooldown available, then if you're able to execute your combo while keeping the enemy rooted, you're able to net some great burst damage, whether it's a single target situation or AoE. The slows for the spec, which Frost is the master of slows, keep it very consistent when it comes to crowd control, as every ability that you hit your enemy with, or almost every ability, adds a slowing effect to the enemy. So managing opponents and keeping them in place, not allowing them to run away, but not letting them get too close to you either, is the bread and butter of the Frost Mage. I feel that this spec, for me at least, is very consistent. Now, fire is all great and exciting and it has massive crits, but I kind of like being able to control my damage and control my burst with Frost, where I'm able to control all these different combos that I can throw out at my enemy. Now, I know that a lot of mages will tell you should probably just play fire and stick to it, but seriously, if you have a mage, give Frost Mage another go. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I cannot wait for patch 8.2 and World of Warcraft Classic to finally come out. But until then, I've been really enjoying PvP, whether it is pushing rating or playing a bunch of alts casually. I feel like the variety is a spice of life, and being able to play a bunch of alts from time to time, being able to get a new perspective on the game, is always fun and keeps me entertained. Let me know what you guys think about my list. Which classes would you put in your top 5, and do any of your favorites coincide with this list? Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.